Welcome to Verify Infield, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Thank you for joining us. We've got Alec Kinslow here, and he is the co-founder and lead consultant for Ascend Safety, as well as the director of EHS, Employee Health and Safety for Giffen Interior and Fixture. And so thanks for joining us, Alec. And today we want to talk about safety in the millwork industry, and particularly employee safety. And that's really what Ascend Safety specializes in. If we get started, I wanted to see, can you first tell us a bit about your background and how you got started in this industry, and then kind of the path to your current...
So for me, it was the right place at the right time. I started out with Giffen Interior, sweeping floors and taking out trash in the summer. It's just a summer labor help. And then one summer, the president, Dustin, he asked me if I wanted some additional responsibilities. That turned into completing the HAZCOM program and getting into compliance. Went to school in the fall, went through nursing school, transferred to respiratory care. It wasn't the right fit for me. Came back to Giffen, had more safety responsibilities, getting into lockout, tagout, machine guarding, and I just never left. Stuck with the safety. I really enjoyed it. So I've been full-time with Giffen. We've been with Giffen for, it'll be 8 years in June. So next month it'll be 8 years. 7 of those have been in safety, and about 5 have been in my current leadership role as the director of EHS.
Okay. Awesome. You mentioned a couple things there. So HAZCOM, what is that?
It's the Hazard Communication Program. So it's how do manufacturers coordinate with the distributors? How do the distributors coordinate with their suppliers to the employers, and then employers to the employees? So it's tracking the chemical from manufacturing all the way through the end use and disposal of that product. So it's a lot of solvents, a lot of stains, but it's also things like household items. If you have bleach to clean your bathrooms, WD-40 to do whatever maintenance tasks you have. So it really encompasses everything, every chemical inside of a facility.
Okay. And so that was early on, like one of the first things you did, it sounds. Okay. Ultimately, out of all of this, you guys started Ascend Safety. So what services does Ascend Safety provide?
So Ascend we are a fully customizable occupational safety compliance company. But we wanted to break the mold of a traditional safety consultant. We had my first full-time week on the job. We had an amputation, and OSHA came out for an investigation. We signed up with a consultant. They gave us programs. They gave us training. They made us compliant, and we checked all the boxes. But that was kind of where everything ended, with the support, with the education, with the engagement. So throughout the years, Dustin and I had worked closely together to develop a program that truly focuses on safety, not just compliance, by educating employees, by engaging employees. And through that, we were able to eliminate that third-party consultant. And I remember telling Dustin, hey, we can do this better. We don't have to pay for them. And he looked at me and he was like, okay, prove it. Show you can do it better, and we won't pay for them. Our mod rate was at 1.7 before I started. This past year, we got down to 0.7, and before that, when we stopped at the consultant, we were at 0.8. So he was like, okay, you proved yourself. We'll stop paying for them. But then we were going through my annual report, and just out of the blue, he and I were talking, and we decided we did this for us. There's other companies out there that were in the same boat we were, where we didn't know exactly what we needed to know, but also that we could benefit from not just a compliance-based program, but truly a safety-based program, because compliance doesn't really give you any benefit. but being safe gives you a benefit.
Awesome. So you mentioned something else there, mod rating. So what is a mod rating, and how does it affect a company's revenue and bottom line profit and kind of ability to do business?
So a mod rating is, you can probably hear it as a mod rating or an EMR, employer modification rating. That's what your workers' compensation carrier uses to gauge you against other companies in your industry. So Giffen Interior, I'm going to nerd out here, but Giffen Interior is in the custom architectural casework and millwork NEICS code. So don't exactly remember what that acronym stands for, but every company has an NEICS code. And it's similar industries nationwide, or similar companies nationwide that do the same work that you do. So your insurance company takes your payroll, your projected losses of being in that industry, your actual losses occurred through incidents, through lost time payments, through medical claims. They take a whole bunch of stuff and they put it into this formula, an algorithm, and it pumps out a number. That number is your rating and your EMR, your mod rate. And what that does is that's a multiplier for your workers' compensation premium. So if you have $100,000 in as your premium, if you are at 1, you're paying exactly $100,000. But if you were like us, 8 years ago, we were paying $170,000 because we were at 1.7. And just off the bat right now, we're only paying $70 on a $100,000 premium because we took those steps. So it's a big number, but it adds up. And this is where not being compliant and being safe comes into play, because you can be compliant and still have a bunch of injuries and still have to pay workers for their time because they're injured and pay medical costs. But when you're safe and you don't have those incidents, you don't have those injuries, you're not only saving from a mod rate perspective down the line, but you're also saving that immediate cost of an injured worker.
The mod rating you just explained, obviously it affects your workers' comp and your insurability. What else? Is that something that customers in millwork are asking for and evaluating what other jobs that you can or can't qualify for based on your mod rating?
Yeah,
your
so
EMR?
if you only do residential work, it probably won't impact you as much as if you do commercial work. With commercial work, a lot of general contractors won't even look at your bid if you are over 1, because 1 is that neutral industry average. Everybody's around 1. So if you're over that, they're not going to look at you. So not only are you paying more for workers' compensation costs, now you are potentially earning less revenue and getting less profit because you're not able to bid additional jobs.
And then in addition to that, what you were starting to discuss is there's real costs just to you as a company, even if your mod is only affected by, I assume, recordable incidents, right? Or
there could be like a 3-hour long discussion on this.
Okay. Well, I want to throw out and define for some people, because recordables is a term people are going to hear if they're getting into safety.
So there is an OSHA recordable, and this is something that you have to put on your OSHA logs at the end of the year. That's anything that is above first aid treatment. So if an employee goes to the first aid cabinet to get a Band-Aid, nothing happens there. They're good to go. They go on their way. It starts to get a little gray with workers' compensation, because let's say I'm working with a DA sander and I cut my fingertip. I go to an urgent care facility, but they just provide first aid treatment. It's not a recordable incident, but now because I have medical bills from that, it turns into a workers' comp thing. And then there's an OSHA reportable incident, which is an amputation, a loss of an eye, death, or inpatient hospitalization. Those are all things that you have to physically contact OSHA and report to them. So it can get a little tricky on when things do what, but you can have a workers' comp injury that is adding costs and expenses into that factor into your mod rate without necessarily having an OSHA recordable. So,
okay. So, taking a step back, then we dove into some terms and some specifics. What does safety in general in the millwork industry look like today, and what does the typical millwork manufacturer look like from a safety perspective?
As a whole, when I look at the industry-specific numbers, we're not very good. We work with a lot of hazardous machinery, and there are shops that have 10 people and shops that have hundreds of people. So those shops are all being equalized into the total recordable case rate from OSHA based on your recordables. So the private industry as a whole, with their total recordable case rate, is 2.7. That's not fair to compare because that includes banks, like retail banks, that includes construction sites, that includes millwork sites. It's the whole private industry aside from government work, things like that. So that's at 2.7. Manufacturing is at 3.3. So already manufacturing is showing that we have more incidents in the manufacturing industry than overall combined. But when you break down the subsections of manufacturing into the different categories, we've got, just off the top of my head here, and I've got some notes here, we've got wood product manufacturing, specifically millwork. We've got cut stone and stone product manufacturing, different suppliers for our industry, or there might even be some millwork companies that have a stone shop. Same thing with structural metals, and then some furniture product building, right? All of those, the average for those industries is 4.3. And they range from furniture related is 3.8, wood product manufacturing is 5.4. So anytime you're over that national average, or anytime you're over that industry average for those numbers, you are already more unsafe because you have more incidents.
So outside of metrics and numbers, like when you walk into a millwork shop that maybe Ascend is going to be consulting with, or is just you're just talking to, what does that look like? What does a typical shop look like? Do most shops have any clue what we're even talking about? When you go and talk to a guy that works in the shop, a shop foreman, is everything we're saying something that they're familiar with but maybe don't know the details, or is this kind of...
I would say it's probably 60-40. Of 60% aren't aware, but that's just because they haven't had a reason to be aware. And then that 40% is they're there and they want to change, which is why they brought us in to do something. When I was down in Atlanta for IWF, I had a booth there, and the amount of people that were like, OSHA who? Like, that, it was alarming to me because, number one, you're a business owner, you're here at this giant event, you're buying machinery, you're buying equipment, you should understand what OSHA is. But as a safety professional as well, I was concerned because I already know that the industry works with hazardous machinery. I know that the industry can be a little bit more unsafe than others, but when the owner or the management of a company just doesn't know what they don't know about OSHA and just keeping employees safe in general, then that's when the employees are at risk, and that's when the industry as a whole becomes more unsafe. But the good news is the shops that want to do better, the response that I get from those, the business owners or the shop foremen, the shop leaders, it's always, okay, you're here, just tell us what to do because we know we have to do it. And it's never a question of, okay, here's my report with recommendations, and then they're like, okay, see ya, thank you. It's, I've got some questions on this, how does this work? And they're not just interested in taking that report and running away with it. They're interested in learning. And for us, that's where that engagement and that education piece comes into play, because we're standing there with them. We're helping them walk through the facility to make it compliant first and foremost as a baseline, but then taking that up. So even for the companies that truly don't know, once they find out exactly what they should be doing, it's very easy to get them on board and to get them integrated into that process.
So why might an owner or leader be interested or motivated to improve their safety? Obviously, we know if they're forced to and they're like, hey, you've got to become compliant. But outside of that, why might people that are listening think, hey, I should get ahead of this, or what can I do, or why might I be motivated to work on my safety program ahead of being forced to?
First and foremost, it's good for business, because businesses are made up of people, and you can also use it as a bragging tool to hire and retain employees, especially with skilled labor shortage. It's hard to find workers. It's hard to find good workers. So if you can show your workers that, look at this awesome stuff we make, you also won't get hurt because we take these steps to prevent you from getting injured. So it helps from a business standpoint, from hiring and retaining your best workers in the industry, but also, as we saw with demoderating, when you prevent injuries, you don't have higher costs associated with it. A lot of times, it's a setback is when an owner or a manager they see the expense of safety. They see it as just something that is a part of it's just a cost of doing business. I'm just going to write a check. We're going to buy some safety glasses. We're going to buy some gloves and call it a day. But they don't see that immediate return on the investment that they're putting out there. So they can sometimes get discouraged and they can back off from it, when that's the best time to start to invest more in it, right? Because no one wants to invest in something that doesn't get a return back for them. So when a company wants to focus on cutting back their mod rate to save costs on insurance, to save costs on potential OSHA citations and penalties, to keep their reputation high within the community, because GCs also don't want to do a lot of work with companies that have had a lot of OSHA citations, and it's on a lot of pre-qualifications that subs have to fill out to even work with GCs. So even if your mod rate is below 1, now if you have a history of OSHA citations or anything like that, then it can still bar you. So companies that want to eliminate that, they want to focus on safety, they want to cut their costs down, that is someone who already wants to do better, and that's when they should start to focus on it, not after something happens.
Not only that, so after something happens, like, there's only so much you can do to bring that mod rate down quickly, right? Because if you have recordables and stuff, those things don't fall off for a period of time, right?
Yeah, they stay on there. So they'll throw out the previous year and then take the 3 years prior to that. And that's what makes up your mod rate. So if you have an incident, a large incident, if you have a surgery that an employee had on their back because they had poor lifting technique and they injured it on the job site, that'll stay with you for 3 years on that mod rate. So you're not only paying for the hidden costs of that up front, but now you're just continuing to stretch out over the long run with that elevated premium. And you look at that and you might say, okay, whatever, it's based off of 3 years. We'll just have a really good year and it won't happen. Or we'll have small incidents. We'll prevent the big ones. We'll just, we'll get some stitches every now and then. We'll be good. But because of the way that it's factored into it, your mod rate can only go down by so many points per year. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head how many points that is, but it's not going to jump from a 1.7 to a 0.7 after one giant thing comes off of it. It takes time over years. But also, if you have one big loss for $50,000 or 1,000 losses for $10. It doesn't matter the severity of the losses that you have. What matters is the total dollar amount of the losses. So even if you're focusing on preventing the big ones, those small ones can add up to still impact that mod rate.
Okay. Something else you touched on a little bit, but there's other things to think about. Employee lost time.
Okay.
And I think that's something that people probably aren't thinking about unless they've encountered it. Okay, now I've had an incident, and yes, there's the cost of if there's a recordable or the insurance or workers' comp, all that stuff. But possibly the bigger impact, especially short term to the business, is, hey, that's possibly a key employee that is unable to work for a period of time. I think that it's easy to not think about that or not even really consider it until you're forced to. But all of that stacks up very quickly, and there's only so much you can do once that's happened and that employee's out, right? Like preventative is really the best way to make a big impact. Additionally, I think people think about amputations, or they think about, some of the more common serious injuries, but what are the real, like the most common injuries that take place in a woodworking shop?
From what I've seen from Giffen Interior and from other clients, it is lacerations to hands. 45-degree edged miters with laminate, incredibly sharp. Post-laminating that, it's just a crazy. Solid surface is razor sharp. So it's just everything, right? And we work with splinters. Yep. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that when you work with your hands, your hands are going to get hurt. And I don't want to downplay that as, it's just being a woodworker, your hands are going to get hurt. I don't want that to be the case. But I did a 10-year analysis of just Giffen's logs whenever I first started, and 46% of our injuries were hand injuries. They were all preventable. It was all razor blade cuts. It was all contact with a tool of some sort. It was all lacerations from material handling. And I want to say there are over 100 injuries that I looked at. So that's over a 10-year period. It's still that's 10 that's almost 1 a month. That's just really bad to have. But I noticed that hand injuries were the most common. And then after that, eye injuries. I think eye injuries were probably 20% after that 46%. So that's 60% of our total injuries were to hands and eyes. Then everything else is, you had your sprain on your shoulder every once in a while. You had something dropping on your toes, Java cabin on your foot. But hands and eyes are the two most common that I've seen. But they're also the two easiest to prevent.
Yeah, I know, especially in woodworking, that's one of the things, like wearing safety glasses is very hard to get guys in the wood shop to do, but is one of the easiest things to do to prevent eye injuries. Same with gloves is a very controversial topic because they are more unsafe on a joiner or on a table saw or things like that. But handling material, a lot of the places where those hand injuries happen, you can wear gloves, and if you wear them, it's going to prevent those things, especially in what we do. You have to have your hands.
Technology has also come so far where you don't have to wear. 40 years ago when Giffen got started, they didn't have the Kevlar reinforced, the polymer gift gloves, leatherwork gloves. So the technology has also come so far from thick, hot, sweaty work gloves to these super paper thin 5 mil cut resistant work gloves that you can put on to carry a piece of plywood or to carry a piece of laminate. And even with safety glasses, with the different coatings that they have, I've got my pair right here. They've got the blue light technology filtering in them, so to help prevent headaches and eye strain. You don't have to get something like that. It could be just a simple one that prevents chips from getting into your eyes. Going back to the eye injuries and everything and how common they are, we completely eliminated eye injuries from Giffen Interior just by buying everybody a pair of safety glasses and saying, hey, anytime you're on the production floor, you got to wear this. We haven't had any since 2016 when I did that analysis. And that was our second leading cause of injury through 10 years. Hand injuries, it's one of the things with the woodworking, you just can't completely eliminate them. But something as simple as buying cut-resistant gloves and saying, hey, here's a pair of gloves. We just ask that you wear them whenever you're carrying material. We've had 5 or 6 hand injuries in the last 6 years. It's those small things that, yes, it is a cost at the time, but over time, the amount of money we have saved is we got that return back. That the issue is we can't always quantify it, because you can't really quantify how much you saved from an incident that didn't happen. Which is, and a lot of times that is a hard, like I said, with owners looking at safety is just a cost. But it's really hard to look at that and say, why are we continuing to invest in this? Because show me the incidents that you prevented. I can't really do that, but I can show you in over time the amount of money that we have saved. It has outweighed the cost of the investment that we have put in because of the injury prevention.
Yep. What about some other things? One, you are able to quantify how much you have saved by getting your mod rating down and your workers' comp premiums and some other things, but you're right, you can't quantify the things that otherwise you would have been spending money on for quartables. I know when our team at USA Millwork was really working hard on a safety program and getting our mod rating down, but also they started quantifying and having people report near misses. And so from that, they were able to quantify, and if anything, they were at that point trying to drive up people reporting near misses in the goal that it would eliminate or minimize quartables. So, for instance, hey, if there's a cord across the walkway that somebody might trip over, you report that and we track that and we fix that, right? And ideally that prevents a trip hazard or a strain or something like that. Things like that seem simple and probably cheesy, but that's like how people get hurt. Okay, hey, I mean, there's, I assume a lot of people make fun of doing stretch and flex in shops, right? But like you mentioned earlier, like it is likely that people get strains. They strain their back or their shoulder or things by, instead of using the vacuum lift, they're just going to manhandle a sheet of material and things like that. Oh, I've got a forklift. I could go lift this instead of, we're going to try to be fast and do this. Things like that takes preventative and coaching and like leadership pushing down and saying, hey guys, don't forget, we don't want you to get hurt. And it might not be a serious injury, but it's enough that you're gonna be affected. It's gonna affect you here at work. It's gonna affect you here at home. You're gonna have to miss time, and nobody wants that, right? Like how those are, like we talked about eyes, we talked about hands, but of the things for preventative, what other things like that do you usually notice first or try to implement first?
Unpacking near misses a little bit more. There's safety is measured in 2 different things with metrics. We've got leading and lagging indicators. So the similar business to business ties, lagging indicators are things that happened in the past. We can't change that. That's your mod. That's your total recordable case rate. That's your amount of injuries. Things that, all right, they're in the past, they happened. We can take a look at those, but we can prevent them from happening again, but it doesn't help us be proactive. The leading indicators are proactive. So what you want to have is a mix of both. Near misses, the amount of trainings that you have, the amount of site walkthroughs that you have, those are all leading indicators to help be proactive to prevent injuries. So in my opinion, there's kind of 2 types of near misses, and they're really hard to get employees to report because to me, they fall in one of 2 categories. One, they're super simple, like that extension cord that you had mentioned, where an employee subconsciously takes it up, they coil it up, they put it on its storage hook, storage loop, whatever, they go about their business. So we don't see that that near miss. So the employee did the right thing, but now the employees in the area, we can't teach them from that. They can't learn from that experience. But then also you have the embarrassment of, oh gosh, I did something super stupid and I almost got hurt. I'm not going to tell anyone. I don't want to get made fun of. I don't want to have a safety briefing, a toolbox talk after me. So you have those two situations where it can not hurt the ability of reporting your misses, but it's not a catch-all, which is why you have to have the walkthroughs, which is why you have to have the trainings, which is why you have to have the education, you got to have a combination of it all, because near misses are great. They are amazing to prevent injuries, to have that discussion. But we're an industry where change isn't common. It's not something that it's not like tech where you got to keep up on change all the time. Our industry there's trends that you have to keep up, but for the most part, our people are doing the same work. So it's hard to get them away from that mindset of, oh, I'm not going to tell anyone. I learned my lesson. I'm not going to do that again. But your coworker, your benchmate, they might not have had that lesson. So it's not about that we want to embarrass people or we want to belittle anybody. It's just, hey, people do crazy stuff. It happens. But we have to learn from that, because it's not just impacting you, it's impacting everybody. Because if you did it, chances are someone else is going to end up doing it at some point.
So obviously, when Ascend starts working with a client, I assume it has to look different whether you're coming in preventatively. Okay, we're trying to improve our safety program. We don't have any big mod rating issues or any big recordables and stuff. We just want to get ahead of that. Versus a client who's saying, hey, I've just had a huge incident, or our safety rating is really terrible and we're losing work. Like, those are two different, I assume, plans of attack that you might be working on.
The first part, it would be that the first grouping is we're going to come in and we're going to do a mock inspection. So that mock inspection is going to be an OSHA style inspection where we sit down, we take a look through the logs, we take a look through the training records, and then, because right off the bat, that's some of the best information that I can get to understand, number one, what the company is already doing, but also what has already happened. So I know it also gives me some more information on what to look for when we do the walkthrough. If I know they have a history of back injuries, I'm going to be looking out specifically for unsafe conditions and unsafe acts that attribute to back injuries. So we're going to start off with that, do the whole, okay, this is your record, this is your report, this is potentially what OSHA could cite you for, this is obviously the whatever financial impacts, if you got the maximum fines on all these things, it could be this, and then here's how we're going to fix it. Not just, here you go, fix it. It's, here's how we're going to fix it. This is what you should do. We're going to do what we can, programs, training to fill any gaps possible. On the other hand, it's going to be more of if they're calling us in and say, hey, we want to do this and this to lower our mod rate, to lower our recordable rates, there's still an inspection, but the primary focus is not the inspection. The primary focus is going to be the management of the program. Looking at the record keeping, looking at the training, again, looking at the programs, looking at the trends, and then taking the trends and digging deeper into those to say, okay, this is the hand injuries are common. All right, we're going to just focus. We're going to focus on PPE. We're going to take this. We're going to invest in the proper equipment. We're going to invest in the employee education. And then we're going to roll this out to employees. We're going to get their feedback. And then we're going to continue working through this one piece at a time instead of just, okay, yeah, your PPE program stinks. It needs to be updated. Here's just a program. We're going to walk away now. So it's the same mindset when we work with new companies. It's just a matter of, are we focusing on compliance at first, or are we focusing on piecemealing it together through compliance to get to safety?
Right. Okay. Awesome. What are, in your experience with what you've gone through in Giffen, right? Like you guys started out, hey, we really need help, brought in a consultant to get compliant, then you guys took over things on your own. What are some maybe less quantifiable byproducts or like benefits you've noticed in the years since, from now being what I would assume is pretty stable in a safe?
I would say employee morale is a big thing. People are excited. It's hard to excite people about safety. There's always going to be moaning and groaning about having to do trainings and everything. But when we were slow and we had employees that were laid off, they went to a different shop and they came back to us. Hearing the feedback of, man, this place is really safe. I'm glad I'm back here. It's cleaner. The machinery's better. To me, that's worth more than any quantifiable metric of cost savings or return on investment, because to me, that's an employee is choosing to come back here and choosing to be in a safer work environment. And so obviously as a safety professional, that's what I like to hear. But it also means that we're keeping the best employees in town. We know when we hire someone and they go through our onboarding and they go through working through different departments, and they realize that the motto here is to think safety, work safely, that if they need to take a second to step back and say, hey, I think that we can do this on the molder instead of on the shaper, or we could totally do this on our CNC instead of making a guide or a jig or whatever. The ability and the empowerment that the employees have to speak up, I think, is probably the best thing. So I would have to say the morale and the empowerment of employees are the two main things.
Awesome. Are there any other things we didn't cover that you want to share with the listeners who may be interested in safety, or things we didn't cover yet?
Yeah, I've spoken at some industry conferences, spoken at AWF, and I'm speaking at AWFS this July. And one thing that I always hit home with, because one of the things we focus on is safety over compliance, and I always relate it back to, you don't let your employees do the bare minimum, so don't let your safety be the bare minimum. And that's all. Compliance is just the bare minimum. It is 100% necessary as a starting point, but like I said, there's no benefit to just stopping at compliance. So don't let your safety be the bare minimum.
Awesome. You mentioned you're going to be at AWFS. That's the end of July in Vegas. If people wanted to find out more about Ascend Safety or to reach out to you with any questions, how are they best to go about getting a hold of you?
Yeah, they can look us up on LinkedIn, Ascend Safety. Check out our website at Ascend2Safety, T-O, not the number, Ascend2Safety.com, and then also email info@Ascend2Safety.com. So those are the three best ways to get a hold of us.
Nice. I appreciate you making time to come on and talk with us about Ascend and about safety. And I know that there's a lot of people that'll be able to learn a lot from this and hopefully get some
thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Alec.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verified in Field.